Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm so happy and grateful that you're here. I'm really excited to tell the story of Sherri Papini. Sherri Papini made headlines in fall of 2016 and again in 2022, in March of 2022, as in a week or two ago. And rest assured, Sherri Papini is going to be in the headlines in weeks, months, and who knows, possibly years to come. And we will be following this story. This story is fascinating. So what I'm going to do is brief us on why Sherri Papini was hurled back into the headlines just a couple weeks ago. And then after that, we're going to take a step back in time, and I'm going to tell you the entire story of Sherri Papini, how her life came to be, and what the heck happened that caused such a twisted and turny and tumultuous journey for Sherri. Man, ever since she wound up in the headlines the first time in 2016, I and lots of other people have always wondered whenever you hear Sherri Papini, like, man, something's not right with that. And now we just might find out the whole truth. Never thought it would happen. Hey, and if you already know what's going on in the headlines today and you just want to hop forward to the entire story of Sherri Papini, go ahead to 6 minutes and 30 seconds. We'll see you there. Let's go over the recent headline.
Authorities say the alleged kidnapping hoax pulled off by Sherri Papini cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars to investigate. Now, the Department of Justice is trying to hold her to account.
Sherri Papini was released from custody on Tuesday, March 4th, after a judge ruled she is not a threat to the community. As a condition of her release, the U.S. magistrate, who is Judge Jeremy D. Peterson, mandated a psychiatric treatment and ordered Papini to turn over her passport. Her family posted her $120,000 bond. A local television station witnessed Papini leaving the Sacramento County main jail on Tuesday afternoon, that's March 4th, where she was met by family members. Sherri Papini is 39 years old, and she's facing charges of lying to federal agents and defrauding the California Victim Compensation Board of approximately $30,000. Man, that's creepy. On November 2nd, 2016, this will give you a brief overview of what happened. Papini was reported missing after going for a jog in her Redding, California neighborhood. Her phone and earbuds were found neatly placed on the side of the road, playing her wedding song, Michael Bublé's Everything, on repeat. 3 weeks later, on Thanksgiving Day, Sherri Papini resurfaced on California's Interstate 5, badly bruised and underweight. This was about 150 miles from her home. She told investigators that while on her jog, she saw an SUV with two Hispanic women inside. When Papini got closer, she said one woman pulled a gun on her and ordered her into the vehicle. Despite the terror of the abduction, Papini told FBI agents that she slept most of the drive. She did not allege she was drugged, although at one point she asked if a stun gun would affect her memory. Investigators told her this was unlikely. Papini said that one of the women told her they were going to sell her to, quote, a cop, end quote. She could not explain why she was released by her abductors. In a Monday appearance on Good Morning America, Shasta County Sheriff Michael Johnson said investigators grew suspicious while interviewing Papini after her reappearance. It is a case of calculated deception, driven, I think, by her narcissistic behavior, Johnson said. It really had an impact on this community, her California community near Redding, California. According to a recent unsealed FBI affidavit, DNA found on Papini's clothing, specifically as her underwear, was linked to an ex-boyfriend in South California. According to the affidavit, the man, who had known Papini since they were teenagers, said she contacted him out of the blue and claimed her husband was beating and raping her and she was trying to escape. The ex-boyfriend allegedly told investigators he drove from his residence in Southern California to Redding on November 2nd, 2016 to pick up Sherri Papini. This ex-boyfriend claimed he eventually drove Sherri Papini back towards Redding, dropping her off when she instructed him to. The affidavit alleges cell phone records from both Papini and her ex-boyfriend corroborated his retelling of the events, and the pair used prepaid phones to communicate. According to the FBI, Papini continues to stand by her story. Quote, "Human trafficking is a real thing, and there are victims out there that need help," end quote, Johnson told Good Morning America. Quote, "Investigations are complex and budgets are tight. So when we put all that effort into such a case and find out that things are not as they seem, and we've been deceived, and law enforcement has been duped, it's really taxing on everyone, no doubt." Johnson also said that the case was hurtful to the local Latino community. "They suddenly didn't feel safe to walk the river trails and be alone," he said. "You have a story of a typical American mom who was just abducted by what is seemingly a cartel-type human trafficking operation, which is just not true. And this disrupted a lot of things for a lot of people around here." Johnson said he wouldn't be surprised if more people are charged in connection with Papini's case. She's due back on court on March 25th for a preliminary hearing. So now that we've gone over the recent headlines, let's rewind and take a look back at Sherri Papini's life. Sherri Papini was born on June 11th, 1982. So that means right now, in March of the year 2022, Sherri Papini is 39, almost 40 years old. She was born on June 11th, so that also means that Sherri is a Gemini. So Sherri and her current husband, Keith Papini, met when they were in 7th grade, and they were just smitten with one another. In fact, Keith was Sherri's first kiss, and they dated throughout high school. They went to their prom together, and their love story was really just very fairy tale-like, except it wasn't a straight shot for Sherri and Keith down the aisle and to saying I do. Sherri was married to a gentleman named David Dreyfus in the year 2006. Dreyfus was in the military and he was gone much of the time, and their romance was really very short-lived. It wasn't long after they were married that Sherri realized things were going south pretty quickly, and she didn't think that things were going to work out. So when she realized that, she got back in touch with her high school sweetheart, Keith. And as soon as they got in touch with one another, it was like sparks flying all over again. They would spend a lot of time reminiscing about when they were younger, thinking back to their first kiss and their younger dates, and looking at letters and notes that they would write back and forth to one another. And they just knew that they were meant to be back together. They fell in love very quickly, and they both felt it was meant to be. It took Sherri 8 months to officially divorce David Dreyfus, but after she did, in 2019, Keith and Sherri became Mr. and Mrs. Papini in a beautiful fairy tale-like California wedding. After they were wed, Sherri and Keith moved into the house that Keith grew up in as a child, and soon thereafter, they started a family of their own. They had young Tyler, and about 2 years later, they had a daughter. It really was, by all accounts, from the outside looking in, a picture-perfect life. Now, Sherri was a stay-at-home mom, and everyone said that she was a wonderful mother to young Tyler and Violet. They said that Tyler and Violet were always dressed in the nicest clothes, and they were involved in a lot of activities, and Sherri would volunteer and get involved in the activities that her children were involved in. People reported that she was a wonderful homemaker, and she was not only an awesome mom, but she was very Martha Stewart-like. They said when she would bake a cake for an event, it would be the tastiest and the most beautiful cake of any there, and she was just very good at what she did. It was clear that she put a lot of energy, time, and love into being a mother and a homemaker. So in fall of 2016, young Tyler and Violet started going to daycare. So, hey man, this is a pretty good deal for Sherri. You know, she's staying at home, so now she has more time to dedicate to being a homemaker and, maybe to herself. I'm sure that she deserved it. It's not easy raising 2 young kids. So, Sherri used to enjoy running and reported that she had given up running during one of her pregnancies, as many women do. So in fall of 2016, Sherri had started running again. She was training for a 5K with the plans of running in one of those turkey trots. It's like a community 5K run that a lot of communities have throughout the country, and she was getting fit. She was looking forward to being involved in this run, and according to everyone, including her husband and her family, things were going really good for them. So November 2nd, 2016 started off like any other day. She took the kids to daycare, and Keith Papini headed off to work. At the time, he was working at a Best Buy. So Sherri sent Keith a text message around 10:30 a.m. asking him if he'd be coming home for lunch. And he responded saying, "No, really busy day. Sorry, honey, not going to be home for lunch." And nobody heard anything else from Sherri throughout the rest of the day. Now, that's not necessarily abnormal, but what is abnormal is that when Keith arrived home in the early evening, he came home to the sound of crickets. There was no Sherri, no Violet, no Tyler. Keith said when he would come home, they would usually have what they called family snuggle time, when Tyler and then Violet would come and tackle him, and they would all hug and embrace and fall to the floor, and it just sounded like a very sweet and loving homecoming for Keith.
I saw our car there, and I opened the door expecting my son comes 100 miles an hour right at me, and then usually Violet right behind him. We do what we call, our family snuggles.
On November 2nd, 2016, when Keith came home, none of that was going on. So Keith was a quick thinker. So he flipped open his phone and opened up that Find My Phone app and was happy to find that he could locate Sherri's phone, and it was at the end of their driveway. Now, no surprise he missed this. The end of their driveway, where their mailbox is a mile away from their house. So he's thinking maybe Sherri took the kids for a walk. They went to go pick up the mail. Surely I'm going to find her there. Gets in the car, heads down to that mile away mailbox, and what he finds is not his family, but it's Sherri's phone, resting at the base of the mailbox with her earbuds, the wires kind of coiled up on top of the phone, and strands of her long blonde hair interweaved through the earbud wire. So this is not good. But Keith thinks, God prays she's okay, and maybe she just dropped her phone here and she doesn't have her phone. So he's a quick thinker. Next thing to do is to call Daycare. So he calls up Tyler and Violet's Daycare, only to find out that the children had not been picked up. Normally, Sherri would have picked them up a while ago, so they'd all be home for family snuggle time, and she'd be getting ready for dinner and their evening events. So from there, Keith, horrified, calls 911. And here is that actual 911 call.
So I just got home from work, and my wife wasn't there, which is unusual, and my kids should have been there by now from like daycare. So I was like, oh, maybe she went on a walk. I couldn't find her, so I called the daycare to see what time she picked up the kids. The kids were never picked up, so I got freaked out. So I hit like the Find My iPhone app thing, and it said that it showed her phone like at our end of our driveway. We don't have really good service.
Okay.
Not the end of our driveway, but the end of our street. So I just drove down there, and I saw her phone with her headphones because she started running again. And I found her phone, and it's got like hair ripped out of it, like in the headphones. So I'm like totally freaking out, thinking like somebody grabbed her.
Okay, what's your address?
I'm at the end of the driveway where I'm at the Old Oregon Trail and Sunrise where they meet, because that's right where I found her phone on the ground. You're telling me that something happened to her is the way I'm looking at it. Then there was hair like in the headphones. Like it got ripped off, like they grabbed.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know you're trying to keep me calm, obviously.
Yeah. What kind of vehicle are you in?
I'm in a black Kia Optima.
So the 911 dispatcher instructs Keith to return to his house and wait for law enforcement. Moments later, law enforcement arrives, and they search everywhere they can think of that Sherri Papini would be that evening, and Sherri is not to be found. So the community takes this very hard. Everyone is very concerned about Sherri Papini, and it seems like everyone is looking for her.
She is considered at risk due to the suspicious circumstances.
Within hours of Keith's 911 call, law enforcement is calling in the reinforcements to help with the search for Sherri Papini.
We're just using a map and we're doing some grid searches.
The longer that someone's missing, that's a very critical time within the first, 24 hours.
They're bringing in more resources. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers are coming in to help. Keith himself makes a public statement or a plea to the kidnappers, expounding how much he loves Sherri, how much she means to he and his family, and just basically begging them, pleading to them to return Sherri home.
I'm coming, honey. I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can. And I love you.
The entire search for Sherri becomes pretty desperate. Keith himself is on the ground searching for Sherri with the rest of the volunteers and the professional search parties. And he talks about the horror of doing that actual physical search. He knows when he's out there on foot looking for his wife, what he's really looking for is a body. And that just dawns on him all of a sudden. And he talks about this horror of thinking, oh my gosh, I'm looking for my wife's body, and how he wants to find her, of course, but at the same time, he doesn't want to find her body. So, the children, Tyler and Violet, are sheltered from the horror of the situation that's going on. But Tyler's 4 years old, and he seems to be a pretty bright kid. So at some point, Keith breaks down when he's recounting the story of a conversation he had with 4-year-old little Tyler.
I told him I had something important to tell him, and he jumped He jumped up on the couch with me, and he knew something was up. And he said, "Dad, you can tell me anything." For a little 4-year-old to say that, I wasn't prepared for that. So I just said, "Son, Mommy went running, and she didn't come home, and we're all looking for her right now." We just held each other, and I said, he said, "Are you looking for her?" And I said, "Everybody in the whole world is looking for her right now." And I said, "We're gonna find her, and we're gonna get her back."
And Keith was not exaggerating. Practically the whole world was looking for Sherri. This story had quickly gained national and then international attention, grasping national and international headlines. This is very uncommon for a missing persons case, for somebody that's only been missing for a few days, a couple weeks. So this case was really, truly consuming a ton of resources. Like Dad said to Son, the whole world was looking for Sherri. So, classical true crime scenario, the husband did it. The husband was involved. So, although, Keith went on television crying his eyes out and just really wearing his heart on his sleeve, to some degree, law enforcement was looking at him. And as far as the public was concerned, there was a little bit of suspicion about Keith because, like I said, I think it's just that classical true crime scenario. So Keith wanted the investigation to move along. So he was willing to give DNA and take a polygraph test, and he passed that just fine, flying colors, no problem. So at some point, Keith was getting a little frustrated with law enforcement. He felt that they weren't doing enough. Now, I can understand this frustration. Your wife is still not home. A week has passed. A couple weeks have passed. But really, like I mentioned, there were so many resources going into finding Sherri Papini, way more resources than in most missing person cases. I kind of think that law enforcement truly might have been doing as much as they possibly could. But still, Keith decided to get a group together of friends and family members that could contribute to the search for Sherri. And they set up a kind of investigation headquarters in a room in
Big sister Sheila and Keith's sister Suzanne.
Please bring her home. She has babies. She loves them. She's a family that loves her. Please just bring her home.
Just bring Sherri home. Eventually, Keith did start a GoFundMe page, and they raised enough money where Keith was able to hire a private investigator. Now, this did cause a little bit of conflict with the law enforcement because they wanted to do their own investigation their way. The private investigator was private. He was outside of the California or FBI law enforcement team that was working on finding Sherri Papini. The police also didn't like that Keith was making so many public statements. They thought, as we often hear, this statement, that it might actually compromise the case. Something good for Keith happened of all of his talking with the media. He caught the attention of a man that was visiting the area. He was actually from that area in California, a very wealthy man. And he saw Keith talking on the news, and Keith's plea to set his wife free just, really overtook this man. And he decided he was going to help. So he talked to Keith and decided that the best thing to do, and I don't know if this is the best thing to do, but was to offer what's called a reverse ransom. So the reward was $50,000, and they were going to offer this reverse ransom. The money is offered to the kidnappers. Now, the condition is that Sherri must be returned unharmed, and then the kidnappers get that $50,000, no questions asked. Now, I always wonder how that works. It's like you've kidnapped someone, you're returning them. Obviously, a lot of people want to press charges against you. You're probably not a good person. So how do you get that money? I never understand that. One issue is that this donor wanted to remain anonymous. So let's couple that with the issue of law enforcement being completely fed up with Keith going out there and talking to the media. At this point, they are giving him strict and harsh warnings that he's going to screw everything up if he continues to do this. So how are they going to get the message out? So they needed to find somebody who is going to be the face of the ransom offer to the public. So a mutual friend connects Keith with a man named Cameron Gamble. Who is Cameron Gamble? Cameron Gamble was in the Air Force, and after leaving the Air Force, he went through something called SEER training, which stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. So he learned to survive behind enemy lines in this training. So after he was discharged, he joined this company and he specialized in this training and then ended up teaching it for the U.S. government to others. Now, what he does is very secretive, so if it sounds like I'm being vague, that is why. In fact, Cameron started a company called Project Taken. And what Project Taken does is it uses these techniques from the SEER training to teach people how to survive. This Project Taken is on a giant plot of land in an undisclosed location. And there's 4 giant aircraft hangars. And these aircraft hangars, Cameron creates situations where you simulate these extreme survival situations, and he's able to teach people these techniques. Now, I've got to tell you, he is a controversial character. I did some research on Cameron Gamble and on Reddit and on various Facebook groups and pages. There are people that are calling this man out, saying that he is a scam artist, that his credentials are not what he presents them to be, okay? There's even more controversy about Cameron because he created a video back in 2012 simulating a survival situation. And in this video, there was a woman who was, bound and gagged and obviously in a distress. She'd been captured, and this woman looked strangely a lot like Sherri Papini. There are also rumors out there that spread like wildfire, apparently, that Cameron Gamble's wife and Sherri Papini starred in a pornographic movie together. Now, this rumor went so far, fast and furious, that Cameron had to do some damage control and, go out and say to the public that his wife and Sherri never met, don't know each other. So, I don't know. But anyway, Cameron Gamble was the choice as the face of the public when offering this reverse ransom out to Sherri's captors. So after the trio released the reverse ransom for $50,000, there was no effect. No one bit. So the anonymous donor decided to increase the reverse ransom to $100,000. So our boy Cameron put out another video. This was on November 23rd, 2016. The next day was November 24th, of course, and that was Thanksgiving morning. Now, Keith had plans within the community to release hundreds of yellow balloons, and the idea was to raise awareness about Sherri being missing in hopes that people would continue to invest their time and energy and resources and money in trying to find Sherri Papini. Well, lo and behold, On Thanksgiving morning around 4 a.m., a woman named Allison Sutton and her daughter are driving down the interstate going to visit some family for the holiday. And Allison sees at the side of the road a woman who appears to be partially dressed, looking absolutely panic-stricken. And oh my gosh, guys, what is worse is this woman has chains around her waist and on other parts of her body. And as Allison Sutton is driving by, the woman at the side of the road is bruised so badly, Allison can see the bruises, and she says she could see the sheer fear and panic in her eyes. So, gosh, it's 4 in the morning. She doesn't know exactly where she is. There's not a lot of other cars around. And, she's thinking, what if this is some kind of a setup? So she does a smart thing and she pulls over to the side of the road and she calls 911. And she's so concerned about this woman that she saw. She waits until law enforcement or some emergency response vehicles arrive.
I was in the right-hand lane and I saw a woman frantically waving what looked like a shirt trying to flag somebody down. She had like a wide-eyed, panicked kind of look. I was startled to see her. It was dark and she pretty much just came out of nowhere. If I had swerved to the right at least a little bit, I would have hit her with my car. I figured if she was willing to risk being hit by a car trying to get somebody's attention, that she must really need some help. I pulled off and I died.
Attention Station 8, unknown medical problem. It's going to be northbound I-5. Female needs medical attention. She is heavily battered. It's going to be some sort of an assault.
Guys, knowing what really happened after last week's arrest makes it really hard for me to tell this part of the story, and I think you're going to understand why. So, battered was, for sure the right word. When, the ambulance took Sherri to the hospital, she had that heavy chain around her waist. She had zip ties around her ankles and her wrists and deep indentations in her wrists and ankles and her neck from being apparently tied up. In addition to the bruises she had all over her body, and guys, layers upon layers of bruises. The doctors could tell that she had taken several beatings over the, few weeks she was missing. Part of her nose was broken and her hair was cut off. Her long, beautiful hair was cut off into this kind of choppy mess. And guys, Sherri Papini was branded. And that's like a really strange thing. That's something that threw investigators and the public and, anyone who really heard about this case back in 2016, she was branded. Apparently it's on the back of her left shoulder, like upper back of shoulder area. And oh my gosh, guys, she was found in Yolo, California. This is 150 miles from her home in Redding, California. And, police released security camera footage from a church that shows Sherri Papini running around before, Amanda Sutton spotted her and called 911 to get her help. And she runs up to the church and she runs up to another house. And apparently, Sherri's really not getting a lot of help or attention here. It's like, I think people were probably a little scared of what they saw at 4 o'clock in the morning, perhaps especially with, the heavy chains around her waist. So anyway, of course, Keith gets a call from law enforcement and he rushes that 150 miles to the hospital to be by his wife's side.
Kind of put his arm around me and he said, prepare yourself. She's alive and you just got to be happy. They branded her. I just ran past everybody and I throw open the curtain, and she was there in a bed, and her poor face. And I just hugged her. I just held her. I felt like I hugged her for like 20 minutes.
I just need to know, because I was worried that when you first said her face, that they didn't brand her face, right?
I will say that no, it's not on her face, no.
So now Sherri's home, but there's still a lot of mystery. So fingers were being pointed all over the place, and law enforcement is investing once again a whole lot of time, resources, manpower, and money into figuring out what exactly happened to Sherri Papini. So in the area, they're looking at these meth houses. Within 3 miles of the Papini home, there was apparently 25 sex offenders. They're looking into all of those people, okay? There's also allegations that this was a hoax. So, these people we now know were probably right on the money. People would say things like the Papinis were a reality show waiting to happen, ready to go. They were attention seeking, and a lot of people felt that something was a little funny about this situation, and people did not trust Keith, and people did not trust Sherri. It took Sherri a really long time to start saying anything about what happened whatsoever. She's never spoken to the media or, anyone else that would make the interview or what she said public, other than, the records that were released upon the investigation. So what she did tell investigators was that, she didn't know a whole lot of what was going on, because a lot of the time she had a bag over her head. She couldn't see anything. But what she did know, what she told investigators she did know, was that she was abducted by 2 Hispanic women. They spoke Spanish most of the time. So, conveniently, Sherri could not understand what was being said. She knows that she was taken in a dark SUV, and these 2 Hispanic women were, just talking all the time and beating her and branding her and torturing her. And these 2 Hispanic women did tell her, apparently in English, because she understood it, that she was kidnapped for a cop, for some cop. Like, she was going to be given to a cop. So she claimed that this made her distrust law enforcement, and that is one reason she wasn't really willing to talk to them. She was so not willing to talk to law enforcement. The law enforcement eventually gave her husband a tape recorder and just asked him, when she does talk about this, just record, okay? Or, could you ask her some questions and please record and give it to us, because we really need to get something on the record. I mean, seriously, have you ever even heard of that? So her memory was very slow to return, and as time went on, she would have these episodes where, they would be in a certain place, or she would see something, she would smell something she claimed triggered her memory of this horrific time she spent in captivity after she was abducted and tortured by these 2 Hispanic women that she did give sketch artists a clear enough description of, so they could put the sketch out, and people were on the lookout for these 2 Hispanic women. We're going to get back to that, because that's important, and that was cruel. But, she said that eventually she was able to escape her captivity, because things went down like this. The 2 Hispanic women started bickering with one another. One night, she wasn't sure. She had a bag over her head. And then they started screaming at each other. Things became really heated, and she heard a gunshot. She claims that then one of the Hispanic women took her in a car, drove her to the point where she was released and just pushed her out of the car and took off. And that's where, we pick up with the security camera footage from that church that spots Sherri running all over the place, running up to the church, running to another house, and then eventually, Amanda Sutton, this really kind bystander, calls 911 and gets help for the battered, bruised, beaten, and assaulted Sherri Papini. For the love of God. So, my friends, I'm going to end this video. It's a part 1 right here. And in the next couple days, I'm going to be releasing the part 2 that is going to reveal exactly where Sherri really was when she claimed to have been kidnapped by these 2 Hispanic women, and the impact that her apparent alleged lies had on the community, her community in California, the Hispanic community in California, and some other far-reaching
the day last week when Sherri Papini was arrested.
Sherri
it's been a long
Papini's
wait. I made a commitment. And I told
mom's
several people that I did not want this to be a cold case when I retire someday. That's the level of
story.
commitment
There is so much of this story remaining. But
and Sherri Papini was seen arriving at her sister's house in Chico late last night. It's unclear when or if she'll return home to her husband and 2 kids in Redding. Now, a preliminary hearing has been set for her about 2 weeks from now.
To tell you the rest of the story because it's a good one. Now remember, Sherri
Papini's
our
chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams. Dan, I was a little surprised to see her get bail.
March 25th, and she is
there's
out
a presumption
on
of bail. She's presumed innocent in this case.
Right now.
Prosecutors made an argument that she was a flight risk based on some of
This story is picking back up from 2016, and we've got a long way to go. She is facing up to 25 years in prison if she is in fact found guilty of the charges that have been brought against her. Unfreaking real. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this case. Have you heard about Sherri Papini? Did you follow the story in 2016, or were you even aware of it? What do you think of what you've heard so far? And what do you think is going to happen when Sherri goes back to court on March 25th? I'm going to have my big bucket of popcorn, and I can't wait. Everyone be safe, take care, and thank you so much for supporting the channel.